Well, let me give you some Flexbox concepts, which should accompany the reading you've done. More importantly, after that, I'm going to take a demo file and run through some Flexbox commands so you can get some of the ideas similar to the text. We're going to use some of Flexbox. There's a lot more we could do with it, but for our purposes, really, unlike floating, which that's all there is to floating, Flexbox, there could be a lot more. We only have to use the initial portion. This presentation, I'm only going to do part of it right now. I'm going to pick it up later and do the layout and design stuff next week. So I think I got too much stuff in this presentation. So we'll just do the Flexbox and we'll catch up with the layout and design stuff next week. Well, layout such as multi-column and gallery pages. In other words, imagine a whole bunch of images side by side and rows and rows and rows going down a page. Those things, we've gone through a bunch of transitions. In the old days, we used tables to lay those out. These designs were rigid and difficult to finesse. We're way past that. In recent years, as opposed, like really up until just like 2 years ago, we used floats. Some people still use floats for this. These were usually fixed pages. In other words, they didn't flex very well. They could flex somewhat. Later, we developed percentage-based systems. They flexed somewhat, and responsive layouts using floating, but it got really complicated. You had to say at this width you float this many side by side, but at this width it changes, and it became pretty obvious that floating was never made to do some of the things we were making it do, with multiple columns or lots of items side by side and many rows and changing widths and so on. It took a lot of code, and it was a lot of headache. And today, many pages still use floating, and floating for individual photos, that's the way to do them. But there's two exciting technologies that make layout easier, flexible, more responsive. I guess I should have said 3. CSS Grid is something sort of this way, sort of not though. So certainly Flexbox for making multi-item things like navigation or a gallery, which we'll do next week. And then multi-column, which for doing multiple columns, it's just made for that. And CSS Grid, you can read about it. Flexbox, officially known as CSX Flexbox, Flexible Box Layout. Great way to lay out navigation menus, galleries, more. Easy centering, it's so easy. Stretching to fill space, space in between. It works on an axis, which is a hard idea to get. And honestly, for the basic stuff we're doing, not that necessary really to understand that well. You need to know how to use at least the basic features. Chances are you probably will do Flexbox for your navigation in the demos that I've shown you. And then you will do a gallery site also, which we'll do that. It does not replace floating for normal use of single images, though. That's still floating. Floating is still fine for that. Grid and multi-column. CSS Grid, overall page layout and rows and columns using an underlying grid. Complex, powerful, not fully supported yet. By now, it's pretty close to fully supported. You would have to worry about some older browsers. It's probably the future of overall page layout when you have a lot of things arranged in different positions. Multi-column is really just for that, but it's pretty powerful. Columns, widths, gaps in between, not fully supported again, gaining popularity probably. Honestly, there's not that. Multi-column pages are a subset of pages. If you want your page to look like a magazine or a newspaper page with multiple columns, you definitely need to use this idea and learn it. And again, it will be fully supported in the future. Flexbox basics. Flexbox is the one that people are crazy about, though, as far as these new technologies, because it does help us do these simple things, these things that should be simple, so much more easily than we did with floating. The idea is we use CSS to make something a flex container. You've already seen this. And we typically call it a container. We don't have to, though. Give it an ID of something and tell it to flex. Then we can use flex direction to set the axis. Possible values are row, which is default, and column. So in other words, is the flexing happening vertically or horizontally, in row or column, right? Every Flexbox has a main axis and a cross axis. By default, row flex direction is the main axis, and the cross axis is vertical. This will make a little more sense when we do our demo, but you frequently, for our basic kind of flexing, you don't have to change the axis. Our default axis is fine. The row axis, flexing horizontally, essentially. We can say flex wrap. No wrap is the default. Wrap reverse. Do the items squish or break into additional lines? Do they wrap onto new lines? We can say flex flow. That's shorthand for flex direction and wrap together. Justify content. How space is arranged. Flex start. It all ends up on the left side. Flex end all goes to the other side. Centering or space between or space around. Both of them interesting ideas. These are really powerful. Center, space between, space around. We can say align items. We're talking about individual items inside the flex container. Aligning them on the cross axis overrides it. Alignment for individual things, and you can use margins auto with a flex container. See your page 432 for more about that. And that's all we're going to do for now. Let's leave the design stuff for later. Okay, so I gave you a bunch of general concepts. Now let's go ahead and do a little demo with them. Okay, I strongly encourage you to take a minute now and pause this video and go to Moodle and download the Flex demo file. I'm not asking you to submit this file for a grade or anything. There is no Dropbox for it, but you can play along with me and try other things to help you learn the concepts of the Flex. Yes, you can just watch, but why don't you do it along with me, and then it'll help you learn it too. Okay, so this is the document I asked you to download. It's called Flex Demo, and this is what it looks like. I got some CSS, nothing unusual here, and all of a sudden we have a class called Box, and it's doing font size and color and text align center. Okay, no big deal, right? And it looks like I have a whole bunch of classes also, box 1 through 10. I could have made those as IDs. I made them classes. Same idea though. I'm only actually using them once every time though. And they're just doing different colors, different background colors, right? Good. And then I have something called hashtag container, and I'm giving things a border. Each thing a border here too. Everything that container that goes around things. And then I say work here, and this is where we're going to be working. I made another declaration for container just to keep it handy. And then we have a box, and you'll see now there's a plain old dot box, and there's all these dot box 1 through 10. Well, what's going on here? All that's in this file is I have a div called an ID of container, and I have each of these tiny little divs inside the div, sub-divs essentially, right? And each has 2 classes, a class of box and a class of box 1 through whatever, change the color. And they each have a number, 1 through 10. That's the only text in them. What does this look like when we run it? Here it is. All it is little numbered containers with different colors. The colors repeat. All right, going down. You'll see this file is very much like the file used in the pages where she talks about Flex. So you can do a lot of the things that she talks about in the chapter with this file if you wish. In fact, we're going to do a few of them here too. You can go on and do more of them with this file and see how it works. And you can apply it, and instead of get more of working in abstract with all these divs. Now, why are they this wide now? It's because that's the width of the page. When you take a div and don't give it any width, it just takes the width of the page. So I have margins on the overall body, so that's why it's ending there. Okay, good. So we have a container that includes all these things, which I have given a name of ID of container, right? There it is, ID of container. So let's start working there with the ID container. And let's tell everything inside here, display Flex. And what happens as a result. Boom! So just telling a container of stuff to display makes it all essentially as if it's floating side by side. And this is the default Flex situation. It's based on a row, so everything's going row-like, and everything's going side by side, and it's all at the start position. And it doesn't take up any more space than these two, and the extra space is left over here. See, this is the extra space shown because I have a box around the whole container, so we can see that there's extra space there. Now let's change the flex direction. I'm going to do flex direction. This is going to be again for the whole container. We could now row would be the default, so we don't need to put in row. It's not. It wouldn't change anything. But row reverse does this. You won't be surprised to see. Boom. Okay. Yeah, that's reversed now, and now with the spaces on the other side. What else can we do? In your textbook, you can read about main and cross axes. It's a little hard idea to get, but kind of does. But it does. You're going to get it, right? You're probably not going to have to use it, but do notice that so far everything is based on a row, right? So another choice would be flex direction column. And you might say, well, what's the point here? Isn't this just how we started? Well, it kind of is, yeah. But you see, things are arranged in a column now. So things are being flexed, arranged in a column. And by the way, just so you can see that it's working, we could say column reverse. So we have a whole bunch of things, and now we can make them flex based on the column. And so we change the axis with the flex direction. And we're going to save that. Column reverse is backwards like that too. And everything is taking up the full container because that's how the height of containers work. Okay, we're going to change this back to row. And we might as well just put row in here, even though just so we keep this command handy in case we need it in the future. All right. So when we save it and run it, it's going to look like this because that's the default condition, right? Good. So we changed it back to row. Sometimes you'll have content that you want to wrap. So we're going to give each of these boxes a width of 25%. Okay, so if each one has 25%, we're going to quickly, and there's 10 of them, we're going to quickly get over 100%. That's going to be the issue, right? Give each box a width of 25%. So what's going on here? It's supposed to be more than 100%, but yet they're all there. Well, that's one of the things that Flexbox does is it still will squish things to fit, which is probably a good thing. So it doesn't just drop them automatically. But there are times when you want things to drop down to the next line. You've got things going to take up multiple rows, right? You have to you want to have a bunch of photos in there in a gallery. You want them to go into the next row, the next row, the next row. And how do we do that? We can do flex wrap. Oops, I'm sorry. Yes, I should have seen that. I'm supposed to do my flex wrap is applying to my container. Yes. Sorry about that. I haven't done a lot of flex work lately. Okay, and now each one of them does take up 25%, obviously, because in each row there's only 4 of them. And they have opened up to what should be their 25% size, and they've wrapped down to the next line. And all of a sudden, it's starting to look like maybe a gallery, right? Nice thing about the 25%, of course, is that how flexible it is as the page width changes, right? If you had hard unit-sized photographs, that wouldn't work quite as well, but you can get the idea. Okay, we also could do wrap reverse, in case you're wondering. and it's wrapping, but it's wrapping in reverse. Now we're going to do the same thing with the column, but we have to set a height for the column. Okay, so we want to make the column work more effectively. So I'm going to go back to, let's just stop for a second. So I'm going to go back to plain old wrap. I'm going to change this to column. And I'm going to make it, we're going to say, I'm going to give it a height of 450 pixels, 450 px. Hard height, so we can make things have to move if we need to. So again, we've got the 25% idea, right? But now it's 25% this way. And they are wrapping. And it's just using the space available. So as it gets smaller, the space gets taken up. And smaller, and so on. And it's squishing as they go. Okay? So we could arrange things in columns and have them wrap again up under the next line as opposed to just pushing down below. If there was no wrap there, let's get rid of that. Say no wrap. Then it's going to go beyond the container because it doesn't have any other choices. It can't squish it anymore because that's the size of the numbers is what's containing it there. Okay. Okay, let's kind of return to where we were. Display flex, flex direction, we'll go back to row, which we don't have to say it's the default, but instead of just deleting the whole line. Flexed wrap, we're going to say, we'll still say no wrap. Height, let's get rid of height for now. All right, and the box, we will get rid of the width also. Okay, good. Now let's try something else. Let's say justify content flex start. Lowercase. Okay, so this is kind of normal flexing behavior without a wrap. And really, that's just the normal. That's the normal behavior. Okay, without the wrap. And now we'll do flex end, flex center. You can guess what's going to happen here, right? Flex end. And flex center. Oops, I got that wrong. Justify content, flex center. Oh no, it's not flex center, it's just center. There it goes. All right. Now we're going to get the idea of the real interest is in space between and space around. Space between and space around. How about justify content space between? So it's justifying the content in there, but it's all, everything is space, this extra space is space between, and what if we do space around? Space around. The difference is it's take half of the same amount of space on this side and put it over here too. Space around and space between are really powerful. I know we're just looking at this in abstract, but we're going to see those things in the use of in our gallery and see how they work. All right, so now I'm going to do the idea here, and you can look in your textbook. She suggests, what if you have a bunch of like navigation, all right, and those would be those individual items that flex, and you want one to be on one side all the way on one margin and the others to be on the other margin all the way the other way. So we're going to see how a margin command can affect these items. As if this was a logo on one side. Imagine we had a logo, we wanted it to be over here, and the other items we wanted to be stacked over here with a certain amount of space between them. So we're kind of like a navigation section. So I want to show you how that will work. So we still are going to do container display flex. If we're still going to do row, we're still going to do no wrap for this example. All right, but we have our box. Now we're going to give it a margin of 0 top bottom. We don't need top bottom, but 6px. Okay, so that's going to contain a certain amount of space. Oh, no more space around. We're not doing space around anymore. Good. Oh, we'll just run that and show you what it looks like. Okay, now, yes, they are, this amount of space between them is based on that margin. So we can use margins with flex. We can use padding with flex also. Their interaction is sometimes a little different. We have to pay attention to it, but we can still use margins. In fact, we can use margins in a particular way. Now let's imagine that that first one, we want to have something different. So we're going to have to add a new selector here. I'm going to add a selector for dot box 1. That's only going to affect the first box because it is a class like that. Curly brackets. Okay, give it a margin, its own margin of 0 top bottom, auto, that's auto on the right, and then 0, 0. Space between them and semicolon. Okay. So we managed to separate one out. Imagine it's like a logo or something. And then what do we have over here? Imagine these are all the navigation items over here with just space in between them. And that's space that will flex also. Well, that flexes too much to a certain point, and then it'll start to grow, and it'll start to grow as soon as there's room for it to grow. So that's a particular using margin auto to separate some of the things from others in a flexed area. Yeah, I know it's a pretty specific thing, but you'll see she talks about it in her example. And then finally, let me show you what we're going to do with our container for the gallery, which is the next and last exercise sort of this week, the gallery. And many of you will do this sort of thing. If you may very well have a gallery of stuff to show on your samples page, the page that you haven't made yet, you'll be making as part of Resume Final, which is going to be all the things that you want to show that potential employer that you have done, things you've written, maybe art you've made, maybe photographs you've taken. Imagine you have a whole bunch of images from a study abroad or for some special trip, and you want to show all the images in a gallery. Well, you would use this kind of command. Instead of blocks of color, these would be images. Maybe with links to page where the image is bigger and you have more explanation, or maybe an image with a little caption too here. So we're going to still do flex and row, and this time we're going to wrap because we have a whole bunch of images and we want them to appear on multiple rows. And we're going to say justify content. Space around. Space between would be fine also. We'll see how that would be slightly different. I think space around works the best, but I think that's fine the other way too. And we're going to get rid of this box 1 now. Don't need it at all. And we're going to not use the margin the same way here. We're going to do individual pieces of margin, just because it's easier to think of that way. So we're going to do for the boxes, the margin left, 10px. Margin bottom, 10px. Sorry, 20px on the bottom. Yeah, that makes sense too. You'll see in a minute. And margin right of 10px. So the 10px's on the side margins will add up to 20. On the bottom, it's the other way. And we have to give each of these things a width. We're imagining they're little chunks of photos, for instance, perhaps with captions below them. So we'll give them width that would be reasonable for a small photo with a caption. 300 pixels, let's say. Good. Oops, I screwed something up here. Let me see what I did. Do you see what I did? I forgot my semicolon. So my width wasn't working. Okay, so imagine these are images with captions, perhaps. They've arranged themselves based on that width and what will fit, and they have space all around them, space in between and around. So then when the page gets narrower, they will stack and restack in different orders until maybe there was just one at the end, and that would get narrower to a certain point. If we went below 300 pixels wide, then that would be a problem. Otherwise, it's going to flex with us and change. And if you did, and the behavior of center is similar. Center. Very similar, except the space is now going on the outside, the extra space. All right, and then it would still get narrower. If you like it centered, at a certain point, it's going to break up into 2, and so on. There's 10 of them, so it works out right like that. And then you could do the other choice, which would be fine, and all these would be fine, would be space between. And now these last ones, all the spaces left is going to be pushed between, which is perhaps not quite as attractive. So I think centering or space around would be good for our gallery, but this is fine too. Okay, that's our demo of the Flexbox. A lot to think about as we move into the gallery.